Can we move this poll a little bit?
You'll notice that who designed the building?
You'll notice the content's like either on the left or the right, so hopefully we'll
There are snacks. You're welcome to help yourselves.
Did you see your giant bowl of shrimp?
Mm-hmm.
The shrimp is for bread.
I thought about just leaving it in the bag for you.
I just grabbed the whole thing.
Eat
You
the
don't have to
snacks.
tell us, slice.
Please. That's all I got.
Will it be distracting if we eat snacks? Like we get up to get snacks. She says,
Go get a sheet. All right, yeah, let's kick it off. So, first and foremost, thank you. I appreciate you all, Lauren and the staff. I appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to come in here and have this conversation and do that sponsorship. It means a lot. So we're going to spend the next hour or so kind of talking about flow state, talking about peak experiences and being in the zone, which a lot of us have experienced through a lot of sports and activities and exercises that we do. From rafting to rock climbing to skiing, even being here in this gym, kind of getting in that mode and just feeling light and strong. We're going to talk all about that. And so before we get going, I'm just going to do a quick intro. So for me, like what's driven me to go and like deep dive into flow state, I have like a 20-year career in like alpine rock climbing, like doing really big, really long climbs. And I was finding myself like 7 to 10 years ago, and for many years, like getting into these states in typically only long climbs, where I was all of a sudden feeling like I was like outside my body, kind of looking down on myself, feeling super lightweight, super strong, moving through highly technical terrain, which for me at the time was like very hard to do. Like it should have felt harder. It was like 5'11" tri climbing. Like that's always hard for me. And I'd be moving through it. This is after already climbing 1,000 feet maybe. So I'm like getting into these states where it's just like, holy crap, like what's happening? And so I just kind of like started to realize, all right, there are some things I need to do to make sure I can get to this spot. Like I need to be well rested, I need to have the right nutrients, I need to be well fed, I need to have the right electrolytes, I need to kind of be in a good mental and emotional state. And if I do all those things, like my probability of getting into that place is high, right? And but it's not guaranteed. It's kind of like a fleeting thing. You hope you get there, but the more you try and focus on it, the more elusive it feels like it is, right? And so I kind of just kept doing that, and then all of a sudden I learned about an organization called the Flow Genome Project. And this is an organization that basically has done all the scientific research, or collected a lot of it from the academics, organized it into kind of go-to-market, and they work with like Naval Special Warfare, Google, like a lot of the big organizations, teaching them how to access flow state. So I took a bunch of classes with these guys, and I kind of then went on my own, just read a bunch of books, and I aggregated all that information into a course. I have a course, but like we turned this into like a 16-minute thing. So I'm going to basically give you kind of the nuts and bolts of what is flow state, and we'll go through kind of the agenda here in a second. But for me, like it's been these activities that have kind of moved the needle and arguably have defined like how I spend all the time in my life. Sorry, Jenny, my wife is here. Although she's a part of that, but she'll tell you I'm always trying to do one of these things. So, yeah, these words are the way to get there. So we're going to talk about this is the agenda. What is flow state? And in a second, I'm just going to open the floor and I'm going to ask anybody who wants to participate, like, what is it? Have you recognized it before? Where was that? Just anything about it. So the question there is, what is flow state? And then I'm going to go through a definition of it. How do we trigger it? We're going to talk about there are a lot of different types of triggers, from internal to external to environment. We're going to go through all of that. We're going to go through the characteristics of flow. So there are ways in which we experience it. And if we call out here today, like what all those different experiences are, and we start to recognize them more when they're happening, right? And then you got to be careful. You turn your attention toward it too much in that moment, it kind of goes away. So it's kind of this careful balance that we play. We're going to talk about the physiology. We're going to talk a lot about the science, like what's happening biologically and physiologically inside of us. And because of that, like why are these things so addicting? Like I'm going to answer that question. Like for a lot of us, we have moved to these mountains and we are here doing the things that we do and raising our kids the way we are because of how we feel about these things, right? And so there's an answer to that. So we'll talk about accessing these, and then how do we integrate it into your life? Like, what do you do with this information, and is there a way with this information to like have it be something that's more accessible on a daily, weekly basis? Does that sound good?
Yes.
All right.
There's a
And if I'm going too fast, or anything, feel free to interrupt me. I can kind of get on a tear, so let's see how that goes. All right, so I'll open the floor. Anybody want to say have they recognized a flow state before for themselves?
So this is kind of like being in the zone.
Yeah.
You're
Flow state, peak experience, in the zone. Yeah.
This was during it was like a trial period. I was microdosing psilocybin as like trying to like make daily better. Not because I wanted to numb it, but because I wanted to elevate. I noticed that when I would take that tiny little dose at night, the next day, this was a very specific one, I was rebuilding carburetors on a motorcycle. And it was just like, my hands were doing the thing, and it was like, they're done. It wasn't like tripping, I didn't feel any different than I normally do. It was a few years ago. But it was a very hard project. Lots of little tiny pieces. I had to go back perfectly. And I was dreading this job. And it was like, showed up, threw down, and it was over before I even realized I was doing it.
Very cool.
So that's my like top level flow state that I can remember.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It is worth saying, my access point for flow states is sports. So you will see through that lens. However, that is not the limit to like how you get there. There are creative accesses, martial arts, dance, yoga. The sky's the limit on how you get there. There's people even who read, get into reading a book. All of a sudden, it's like, whoa, where did 8 hours go? Like that's a flow state, right? And they love that. And there's people who love to read. So. Just know that that's going to come through this. Thank you for kind of reminding me of that.
I used to get it when I was long distance running, when I knew the trail, there wasn't anything to question, am I on the right? Am I on the right trail? I've done this multiple times, so you can kind of like, it's a little bit more automatic, and it takes a while to get into it, but recently I found it through painting.
Kind of like breath work.
Just when I'm painting.
Oh, painting.
Painting.
Oh, that's a difference. Interesting, right?
Not so much. Yeah, painting, the whole world goes away during that.
Very cool. So hard. I found too, like that repetition. Especially like for me, like rock climbing. If it was just slightly below my level and I could just move, like all of a sudden you're just like, oh, I'm not paying attention anymore, and you just even fall into it. And you talked a little bit about that too, just going into it. Anybody else? Yeah.
I go to ecstatic dance, and so like.
You go to what?
Ecstatic dance.
What's that?
It's just expression of emotion through movement and dance. They do it in Salida every other Friday. It's almost with Tim and Ellie. It's almost like emotional, and also it's like very like meditative and connecting like with myself. And the purpose of the space is to like tune out and go in, but like in this space where there's like a lot of this energy moving around the room through like physical expression. And it's not necessarily like dancing like you would at a concert. It's really just expressing how you feel like through your body and moving the energy in your body outward. So I don't know, I've felt it several times there.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Sounds healthy.
Yeah, it is. It's almost like cleansing or like purging. It's like right before it. It's like you go to this thing where there's like electronic music playing and you're dancing, but you go so deep within yourself and all these like emotions come up.
Purging for sure. Well, thank you guys. So there is documentation all throughout history from many different cultures of this type of thing. The Greeks called it ecstasis. They called it like stepping beyond yourself. And so they're kind of just talking about that. Plato, obviously a philosopher, talked about an altered state where normal waking consciousness vanishes completely and is replaced by an intense euphoria in connection to a greater intelligence. I think that's like one of the best descriptions I've ever heard of it. Because that connection to a greater, something bigger, like you often feel that.
I just had it makes a car weird, so.
It sounded like a movie. Navy SEALs, they talk about it as flipping the switch. So something interesting about kind of these special operators is everyone who tries out for this thing, like they're all great, right? What gets you removed from the SEAL teams is that you can fall into a group flow state as you move through space and maintain your precision and skill. So that is, it's very interesting to learn that, right? It's like that's how they remove people. It's like you can't quickly just flip the switch, they call it flipping the switch, and just move through a space and use your preparation and training in order to just quickly access that. So I always thought that was super unique. So, not medically, but scientifically, what is happening and what it is called is transient hypofrontality. So what is happening if you look through kind of medical imaging is that the prefrontal cortex, which is our higher level thinking brain, the brain that's kind of like we're up in our own head, we're overthinking things, our logic brain, it kind of downregulates. It downregulates. And when it does that, it kind of starts to leave space for us to be super present, right? We're no longer anticipating the future, kind of like the fundamentals of meditation a little bit. We're not anticipating the future and worried about the past, but we're just kind of like, what's happening right here, right now, and I'm reacting to it, and I'm working with it. And so there's actually like, physically something happening in your brain like as that's happening, and that's really cool. And we're going to talk more about the science piece of this. Sorry, I built it differently. So some of the benefits, actually, guys, before we do this, here's what I'll go through. So some of the things we experience as we get into these states, and you guys may resonate with this. So timelessness, time seems to kind of fade, right? Like all of a sudden a lot of time could go by and it's like, whoa, where did that go? Weightlessness, I experienced that a lot. I was just moving upward as if I was moving down, right? Like I felt, and then a lot of ease and a lot of strength associated with that. There's amplified focus and precision. And in these states, your brain is capable, and I don't know how to measure this, but in our normal waking state of being, we're capable of like interpreting 150 to 200 data points. Like that's how much information like our eyes and mind can work with and then make decisions with and react with. In these transient hypofrontalic states, there's thousands of pieces of information that we're leveraging. So we become more.
What's considered like a data point? Is it like what you see or like your senses?
All sensory information. Everything that you can possibly interpret is coming towards you. So, yeah, super interesting. And again, elusive. And so some of the other things, you get increased pattern recognition, you get increased productivity, creativity, problem solving. I think mental health and well-being, we're going to talk about why that's the case in a little bit. And ultimately, I think these things are super fulfilling, right? Like, every time I've had one of these things, it's all I can think about. I'm so ecstatic for a significant amount of time, and I just want to build that back into my life. So that's pretty cool. Being in the zone is pretty sweet. So, anyone know who Jimmy Chin is? Yeah? Remind me after this, how Jimmy Chin saved my life one time in Yosemite. I got myself in trouble. So we're going to talk about triggers for a few minutes, flow triggers. What triggers this situation? Externally, from the environment, there are three major things. So first is deep embodiment. Deep embodiment is like my body is engaged with this environment in some way. And usually there's like an immediate feedback, right? So best example I can give is like skiing or mountain biking, right? If I am going down the trail, I'm making decisions. If I make a wrong decision, there's feedback, right? Like I could be in the ground or on the snow. So that immediate feedback as we manipulate our craft or our body through this space, that keeps us focused on it, right? So that's like, we call that deep embodiment. The second is rich environment. So this is kind of like novelty. And I think this is why nature facilitates this so well, right? Because it's a rich environment. It's mountains, it's snow, it's something I've never seen before. It's beautiful, you know, all the aspects that go into these spaces and these places that we go to, these things. That richness tends to lend itself more towards people falling into this. And then the third is high consequence. So when you layer risk into the situation, it forces presence, right? Like going back to my definition with the mountain bike, if we crash this mountain bike, think we are in trouble, right? Like, that can't happen. So presence becomes super critical to like our ability to kind of to access this state. And so throughout the course of the conversation, like and I'm gonna give you guys all these slides, but ultimately like what we're trying to do over time is figure out like, how do I craft this for myself? Like how do I create a situation that's novel, that's unique, that's rich in all of these different ways, and then also layer risk inside of it, but don't hurt myself, but give myself this opportunity to potentially explore that space. Right? So there are a couple of different types of triggers. We just talked about some of the external ones. There are internal triggers. We're going to talk about those in a second. There are creative triggers, and you talked about painting. Dance, I think, is a creative trigger. It's worth mentioning because you brought up mushrooms. If you, later on, we're going to talk about what's going on inside the brain, like when you're doing all these things. There are basically they've determined there are 3 ways to create these exact states. Psychedelics is one of them. That's one of the few. Flow states, kind of the way we're talking about it through sports and activities, is another. And then like mystical kind of dance, martial arts, those types of movement things, the brain's doing the exact same thing, which is super interesting. So there are 3 ways to explore this. I'm going through kind of one avenue right now, but it's worth knowing like you can talk about this from 3 ways. And then the fourth is group flow triggers. I think certainly I talked about the military example, but even maybe if it's climbing or anything, dance is actually a perfect example. You know, when you get into a movement and a flow with a partner, with a group of people, and that starts to like unfold in a supernatural way, there's a group flow state opportunity where multiple people are participating in that. That's pretty sweet. All right, so some of the internal flow triggers, like if these things are true, then the potential and probability for you finding and creating this for yourself is expanding, right? So it's the intersection of like curiosity, passion, purpose, you have goals in this space. Like I always had major goals in my alpine days, like we were trying to do this and then do that. Like we were tied in, right, in all the different ways that we can be tied in. There's autonomy, there's complete concentration. A lot of that has to do with risk, right? You have to be concentrated or you may hurt yourself, and that forces this space, this focus. I think this gym is actually certainly like that. I find myself in certain movements, like throwing barbells, and I'm like, this is not the time to be thinking about what I'm doing after. We're focused right here, right now. And then when you do, sometimes you get in that superpower space, right? And I just love that. So I think complexity and unpredictability is also super important. Like there's the repetitive nature like we were talking about, but also being surprised by that, right? And knowing that like I have to be present because something's gonna present itself and I have to deal with that. It could be like biking or skiing or whatever. Those are like really good examples, but you can build that into however you're coming at this. That unpredictability and surprise is super, super critical. And I think that also, just like risk, forces presence, and that downregulates that prefrontal cortex, which is like always focused on the future and the past. Right? How are we doing? Is this resonate? You guys like it? Yes. Sorry. So yeah, we talked about the external flow triggers. We'll move forward. So this is called the challenge skills equation. The guy they call the godfather, I think, of flow, the father of flow, he was this academic professor, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. He wrote a book called Flow, The Psychology of Optimal Experience. It's a sweet book if you're interested in this topic. But he kind of defined, he actually coined the word flow, so that's kind of interesting. But he kind of crafted this, what they call it the flow channel. And the flow channel is kind of like what we've been talking about. There has to be a certain amount of challenge and a certain amount of skill required to navigate, or like to put you in the sweet spot, right? So if it's too hard, then I'm just gonna get blown out, not be able to kind of move through, create a repetitive function inside this space. If it's too easy, I'm not engaged in thinking about what's coming, what I'll do later. So it's this super sweet spot of like, it's hard, and it's taking enough of my skills to push me into that present moment. Does that make sense? I actually think that there's a tertiary access to this, and that's risk. Like, you put risk on top of challenge and skill, and like that presence is like it's hard to find it, right? Because the result of not being there is just so bad. And so I like that, obviously. Yeah, it's kind of like navigating that line between panic and flow state, right? And what's interesting, we talk a lot bit more about like, the neurochemicals and like what's happening in your brain, but when you go too far and you actually get panicked, and you feel like your vessels kind of constrict and your heart rate goes up, and like you've gone too far. Like you've actually just created like the opposite effect, and now you're going to become myopic and it'll pull you right out of your state. So that's an interesting medical way to think about why this is true. Like it can't be too hard and it can't be too far beyond your skill set.
Is there a way if you pass that line and go from flow to panic to get back to flow?
It's hard. It's hard because you're dealing with your body. Like you gotta like down regulate. It takes a lot. I think you can because I've done it. I don't know if I've ever gotten back into it in the same day, but like on a 3-day climb or something like that, like the next day I could. But you just get so, it takes a lot to kind of down-regulate out of that.
Is it like an adrenaline response?
That is what it is. It's epinephrine, it's adrenaline. Yeah. And so it's we naturally, well, don't get me on that, so we're gonna go. Okay, so we are gonna get kind of medically now. So with an EEG is an electroencephalogram. So if we connected a bunch of electrodes to your head and we looked at the electrical activity in your brain while you were in one of these flow states, actually at any time, right, in your waking state, we would learn that there are basically 4 states of consciousness, right? There is a beta, alpha, theta, and delta. Like that's where we typically exist and operate on a day-to-day basis. If we're super lucky in some of these peak states, we experience like that gamma, and it's usually a cross between the gamma and theta. Those two we kind of toggle back and forth between the two. And so that's super, it's interesting in that we start to understand that there's a way to like move ourselves between these. That's the point of this, okay? Beta brain waves are the waves that we basically exist in, I would say, unfortunately, like 80 to 90% of the time. Like when you wake up and you're doing your to-do list and you're managing your kids and you're multitasking, you're at work and like it's all that kind of like stress hormone kind of function, that's a beta brainwave state, okay? And we'll talk in a minute about like what neurochemicals are present during that. So give me a second on that. The second is called an alpha brainwave state. Alpha is when we downregulate. So let's say we're doing breath work or yoga, or even just we get kind of hyper, we stop for 10 breaths, and all in that downregulation that we get, that's the shift from beta to alpha. So alpha is like that downregulation, that calming, that relaxation phase. Okay? If you're not careful, like you can just, like as we all know, like we can just sit in beta all day long and just go to sleep, right? Like that's, so part of what we're gonna learn here today is like, we need to consciously like know we're there and then like introduce other things because that's healthy, and I'll tell you why it's healthy in just a few minutes. When we're in flow, we're actually, as I mentioned, kind of accessing the theta and the gamma waves, but flow isn't guaranteed, right? Like certainly not every day per se. Like most of like our stress waking lives, like we're not going into flow state. Like maybe if we're lucky, a couple times a week, we're like doing one of these fun activities that we get to do. So it's not guaranteed. And then recovery, that's when we're sleeping. That's when your brain shifts into delta state, right? So just take away from this that there are brainwave states. And now we're going to kind of talk about them in relation to a cycle, because that's how we experience them. We experience this in a micro way, day to day. Like we struggle, we work, we take care of our families. We hopefully have a release at some point throughout the day, like I talked about, and that down regulation. We aren't guaranteed a flow state, right? But so oftentimes we're shifting just from 1 to 2 to 4, where we recover and we go back into the same thing. And so part of the conversation here today is to introduce that flow state as one of the opportunities to disrupt and to create a new piece of the flow cycle, right? We'll talk about that some more. I'm actually going to go to this next slide. We'll come back to this one. So each of these stages of the flow cycle, these words are kind of small up here, but is tied to a neurochemical. So when we're in beta, which is like our stress state, right? We're working, we're multitasking, taking care of things. We're releasing cortisol. We're releasing norepinephrine, which is kind of like for alertness, focus, and it keeps us a little edgy. It keeps us able to do that part of the day, like to do those tasks, right? But it is stress. It is stress. And so when we release and we downregulate, like for example, if we're doing breath work or in yoga or whatever it is that you use, could even be this gym, your body's releasing nitric oxide, right? Nitric oxide is a hormone and it dilates your vessels, your vasculature, so your arteries and your veins, lowers your blood pressure, lowers your heart rate, it lowers your breath rate. I mean, physiologically a lot is happening. And so the reason why it's important to flow is it is scientifically demonstrated that people who consciously navigate frequently between beta and alpha access flow more regularly, right? Like if someone who does that type of work, even just downregulates with 3 breaths, right? Like just calm myself down, all right, now go back into it. That is, you're doing something, you are actually toning what is called the vagus nerve, like the 10th cranial nerve, which is responsible for the parasympathetic nervous system. That downregulates your body, and you're keeping it in shape, right? So if you don't do that, it becomes harder to access these flow states. So that's kind of the takeaway here.
It seems like in certain workouts, I mean, since we're talking CrossFit, like I can be 3 of those at once.
Yeah.
Like yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, that's my struggle here.
But like, I'm here because this is a release from everything outside this building. And yeah, if I'm rowing 2K or 20 minutes or whatever, like, I mean, I'm definitely flowing. And then, I mean, I'm not really recovering, but like, I don't know, it seems like you can be in all these things in certain activities. Somehow.
Yeah, the activity itself can facilitate the whole cycle. Your day could be that cycle. I think you'll experience some form of this in a week. There will be a year's version of this, right? Like where we go through the seasons. Like I feel differently per season, where I need more rest or less rest. Yeah, for sure. Complex. But true, it's like one system that you can apply to all of it. And I think one thing that's super important is that you build recovery into all of it, right? Like if you're talking about, we're recovering from the workout, we're recovering from our week. If it was a big year in a certain way, like you create space to like recover from that. And that is important, I think. And I think the last thing I'll say is, the reason we're starting to see some of the neurochemicals associated with flow state. So those are fundamentally different. Like these are the happy things. Like you're getting dopamine, you're getting endorphins, you're getting serotonin. Like these are big chemicals, and this is where that euphoria comes from, right? And so this is kind of like the natural lever You know, like the mushroom is the artificial lever, still lever, but it's important to see it that way, right? Because it's essentially the exact same chemicals that are pulling the lever on.
Where does like the come down fall into all of this? Like after that big release of the dopamine and the endorphins and like the flow state.
Yeah.
There have been times where I've experienced that, or like even like after taking psilocybin, like there's like a come down phase. Like where does that fall into these four?
It's a good question. Let's go to it here.
No.
So whenever you, what I call yo-yo a chemical, like you go up and then there's gotta come down, right? And it's all good as you come up, and it's even good as you're coming down as long as you're above base norm, like you can see here, like where it crashes. But the minute you fall below that baseline, there's that
Despair.
Yeah.
Kind of like.
I felt that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
After having a peak experience.
Totally.
Yeah.
And the deeper the peak experience is, the deeper this is.
Yep.
Because of the more chemicals you've got. And so this is an important thing to be aware of, and that's what it is. So that's exactly what it is. And I think it's not only true for dopamine, it's true for serotonin. The time horizon for serotonin is longer to get it back. So when we burn that one hurts a little while. But most of what we're talking about here, like regenerates in a day or 2 or 3. Okay? And so it's important. The other thing that you see is like what happens, I'll come to you in a second. What happens when you get to that spot, in that depressive state, people were trying to replace it. So how many times have you like gotten off one of these things, or come down, it's like, oh, let's go get beers. It's like, no, I'm gonna do that. But we're kind of like already replacing, or we're trying to go higher than we were. Sorry, I had you.
I was just curious if you know of almost avoiding this process because the crash is so significant. Like, do you find that like people avoid the flow state because the other side of that euphoria is so dramatic?
It's a good question. I think anyone, at least from our experience, anyone who's gone so far as to understand this is probably not avoiding it. They're probably going after it. But there is that. I mean, you might, that's the thing.
I think I have had these moments, but then I almost have almost like a hyper awareness, and it turns to panic, and then so I actively avoid feeling that state.
Yeah,
because you just feel like okay.
Right,
Instead
to
of
feel like I
feeling
have more control versus
through that.
Yeah.
feeling like I don't. Like, I wake up and I'm like, oh, I had no control during that time, and so then I try to avoid it.
It's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It can be. Yeah. Yeah, it becomes like, well, is this something I need? You know, like for me, I need, it's my purpose of being is wrapped around it. So I have to go get it. But sometimes you get it right. The first time I ran a code, like a CPR in a medical environment, I got the craziest flow state. I was high for days. And when I came down, I was so depressed. And what I do you have to have coping mechanisms for that. So mine is straight cardio, I will run in the mountains until it's done, until I kind of all right, I've known myself to this problem, and then come down, and then usually after a sleep, I'm okay. But if I sat in that and didn't just burn the candle in the in a cardio way, I'd probably be depressed for 3 days. So I've got a mechanism for it.
Michelle, I can speak to that, the control issue.
Yeah.
I have a coping mechanism, it's very helpful.
Yeah. I felt it.
But that means explore it, you kind of have to explore that down phase that's so uncomfortable to understand how to come back out of it. It's hard.
I think you can find different flows where you can stay in control in the flow.
Yeah, I can say that.
Rock climbing versus kayaking. Kayaking, you can be in the flow and then something turns scary and you're like, I don't want to feel that anymore.
Yeah.
Like rock climbing, it's like you feel like you're a little more in control of your situation. And so you can
to explore there. Yeah.
But and also I'll add to this, humans experience, like there's two major loops of dopamine. So one's long term, and it's a totally different loop in our brain. I can't remember all the details of it, but then there's the short term, right? And every day we're like constantly having short term dopamine hits. Everything from like wanting to get out of bed because your coffee's made for you in the kitchen to, but then there's like the longer term ones, and I think this down curve, like this crash, I think I think of that as more associated with like a long-term goal that you've been working on for maybe potentially years of your life. And once it's fulfilled, your body, like your brain is like, oh my God, like I don't know what to do with myself. I've been in pursuit of this for so long. And inevitably, we as humans will come back to another goal, right? But like that's what we're like built and designed to do. But I think it's those longer term goals that kind of like can be a bigger hit, you know? Whereas like just prattling, you can get in the flow state, but it's not like you're gonna repress the next day. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I've experienced those. Like when we were like competing at our age group or whatever, like CrossFit, we build up like that whole 6 months or quarter of the year, and then it was over. So
Now
like,
what?
man,
Yeah.
I wish I was still like, I wish it was still the day before CrossFit or whatever. It was like, 'cause that was amazing. You know, that was like it. And now it's like, what are you doing?
What do we do?
Everything else really sucks, man. But, yeah, that's a big one versus like, you know, whatever excitement happened today. You know, that was like really smaller. Yeah.
Yeah, super interesting. Certainly dopamine is the thrill of the chase chemical. And typically the second you attain it, it drops. And that's true of like a big thing like you're talking about. It's also true of like something like microscopic, like nicotine. Like, right? It's like, oop, down, right? And then you gotta go through this thing to get back to normal. Was this day?
Yeah, we went on a. Sorry, thank you, yeah.
Yeah, I won't go through this because we kind of just did it, but these are like, go through it later, I'll give you this. These are just all the neurochemicals that are present on like a day-to-day basis. I think I've gotten to the point where I know them by name. Like I know like what I'm experiencing in this moment, I know what's driving my motivation. Doesn't necessarily always make it easier, like I still consider myself like an addict of sorts, like I need these states, still want a beer, like, you know, all these things. But I think knowing them by name, like knowing them inside of yourself helps to create a better plan and to like, you know, manage them in a more appropriate way. I can't remember. Let's go through it. So, kind of starting to get to our summary. We're starting to say like, all right, we have these tools. The tools are breath work that moves us from that beta to that alpha state. There are other tools too to do that, but they typically involve, like to engage that parasympathetic nervous system, to change that stress cycle, you have to use your breath. So it could be through yoga, it could be through exercise, it could be through CrossFit, it could be through some of these things, but breath is like the access point to the vagus nerve that does that, right? So you have to be thinking about that, and typically when breath is tied to movement, that's the best. That's why they say yoga, dance, martial arts, breath work, those types of things. So these are tools. They introduce those new neurochemicals. Meditation, that kind of releases that mind, down-regulates. Exercise, like we're doing in here, super important. Endorphins. Do you guys know, I found this out preparing for this presentation, endorphins actually attach to the opiate receptor, the same thing that morphine does, or fentanyl, right? And it is actually more potent and has a stronger bond than morphine does. It is our body's natural opiate. And so it's super powerful, and it is one of the primary things that we get by coming across it. Like we walk out of here, we feel good, we don't feel pain a lot of times until later. Until I sit down. I don't right away.
I think that's one of the reasons we really try to encourage people, if you are injured, to come in, and even if you're on the bike for 40 minutes, to come in and move. you know, because it's happening.
Yeah.
Threatening people with 40 minutes on the bike is not.
I didn't say 20. I didn't say
Just so you know.
Slow roll, please.
Slow roll.
Slow roll.
But to that,
Just legs.
like today, like a lot of people came in at the beginning of class today, like really not pumped to run and row and run, and then they finished the workout and they're like, that was great. So I don't know, it makes sense what you're saying, that like that those endorphins that we get from what we do in here, like you leave feeling better than you came, even if you did something really hard.
You guys can come back.
Keep coming back. I wanna hear it.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, well, what do you do with this information? I kind of come up with 3 things. It's kind of like, well, defrag your nervous system. To me, that's like just getting in the habit of down regulating. Don't just be blind to the fact that you're like in a beta stress cortisol state like all the time. Like, you gotta come out. Like, create space, create windows in your day, in your week to do that. And we'll talk about that in a second. Cultivate these peak experiences. And I think there are like micro peak experiences, like things you can do just every day. And then there's kind of like, well, what can I do only once a week? That's a bigger thing. What is there maybe I only have time for once a month? And you start to engineer, you know, a depth and a frequency for these things that kind of looks different based on how deep you can go with it. And so for me, that's kind of like this engineering thing, right? It's kind of like take an inventory of yourself. Like, what are your triggers? What are the ways you've experienced flow states before? What are your activities for that? It's kind of just like a flow inventory, right? It's like you can just be mental and think about it, and then just kind of just look at, all right, is it a part of my life? Sometimes we get in the habit where it's just it falls away from us. We get so busy, we get tied up with responsibilities, and so it's kind of like this constant process of reminding ourselves to keep this as a part of our lives, because what you're actually keeping as a part of your life is the neurochemicals that keep you happy. That's what you're doing. And so that's so important, I think, today, in today's age. And I think it's important to teach it. It's like our kids. That's what I'm thinking about. Yeah, so let's see. What else? I think that's it. I think the last thing I want to say is, you know, so there are moments where in that flow cycle, you kind of start to, you might think, why are things so hard right now? Like, this happened to me recently. Like, the last 2 weeks here in this gym was so hard. Like, before I left for a trip I went on like a month ago, I felt like I was crushing, I felt strong, I had tons of energy. Something happened, right? And it's like, actually what happened was I stopped going to the gym for 3 weeks. So that's kind of the thought, right? So I call it like the tuning fork. You think of, you know, a tuning fork as something you hit to set the note on an instrument. So the tuning fork is like getting back on the horse of those activities, those flow state mechanisms that bring those chemicals, those happinesses, like into your life. And so when you find yourself in that moment of like, dang, things are just tougher than they normally be. I feel like I'm like stuck in mud a little bit. It's like just take a deep breath, down-regulate, remind yourself of that inventory that you took of like the things that keep you connected and happy and responsive, and I think just get back on that. We build the frequency back in. We're back in the gym, you know, day to day. We're building in that bike ride per week, or whatever it is for you guys. And I think that's helped me a lot, kind of get through some of those tough spots faster.
A weird question. So people that are on antidepressants or serotonin, you know, SSRIs, does that interfere with? Do you think it's harder for people to achieve?
No, because all an SSRI is doing is kind of blocking some of those receptors, which leads to more of a bioavailable amount there. But by putting more in naturally, you're just going to feel better. So. Any questions?
How do you balance the risk piece?
Like not getting hurt?
Yeah, like, is there a way that you're seeking that flow state?
Within your boundaries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, what I've learned is like you don't have to be like at the edge, because when you're at the edge, you're flirting with fear, getting disrupted by like your skill level not being enough to compensate for like what you're trying to do. So in my experience, like again, think about that flow channel. Like it needs to be hard enough, but it needs, my skill needs to kind of match it. But like you can be 20% below like your top line, whatever that sport is, and I think you're there. It really comes down to, are you forced into presence? Like it doesn't have to be a hard bike ride or ski, but like if I have to be present doing it, you know, and you get those repetitive motions and all those different characteristics that we talked about, those flow triggers, then I think it's easier. So I pulled back from the edge. I got hurt a lot too.
Yeah, you don't have the age risk.
What about using the flow state as a tool? Like if you, if your job is hard, whatever that is, mentally, physically, whatever, like how do you get in the flow state just to like operate daily, to like be better at what you're doing? Like I feel like it's easy to do it here, or you know, ride the bike, do the thing that's all rewarding anyway. But like, you know, I have to go to work.
Yeah.
I want to be better at it.
Yeah.
In a flow state where things like, you know, decisions are being made and like stuff is just like all happening.
Yeah. You know what a lot of this is like creating the foundation, like a neurochemical foundation in your body that creates a person of capacity, like you have more emotional capacity, more physical capacity. And when you, like we all know, like when we are cold, when we have that resourcing, like we perform better at work. Like work is easier. It's when we're like without that and we're worn down that those things feel harder. So for me, thinking about introducing these things has been a way to cultivate that resource and to make sure that I have the capacity to like respond well and have things feel easier. Which is why I like to come here. So yeah, that's probably the best answer I can give you. You know, it's,
Like even those things in the morning here like helps the day, or like
yeah.
3 days a week you go, life is just better.
For me, yeah, and then it's not just that. Like, this morning I hiked up Princeton, I paraglided off of it, I landed in my car, I drove home. Like 2 days ago.
What was that about the risk? Rewind it a little bit.
It's like, yeah, whatever it is. But I think it's for me, it's like multiple things. Like 2 bike rides a week, I'll do that, like what I just said, once a month. It's not that frequent. So I'm trying to splatter in like these things. Like there are things I just do once a week, maybe twice a week. There are things I might only do once a month. And there might even be some trips, like a week-long trip I can get away from the family and the kids, and I get a whole week, right? Like what are you going to do then? So yeah, and like all of that combined, and then it's just hard, man. Like sorry, but
Right.
yeah. Yeah.
But is there something to be said about that, like what you call like the mushroom, the artificial, like the perfect drug, whatever, that gets you there? Is that damaging? Is that a tool that is like?
Yeah, for me, I think it's a good tool. I think you just be careful with it, right? You're at the end of the day, just think of the dopamine curve, and like, are you allowing yourself to are you being intentional with that? Are you allowing yourself to recover from it? Because you are burning that candle, but it can be valuable too. You get a lot of insight. I generally think stay away from dopaminergic things like that. Those are bad things. That's going to be like your stimulants, your nicotines. Those things make you like very volatile. So like serotonergic things are better. Those are going to be like we're going down the rabbit hole here. But that's going to be like your mushrooms, your LSD, like those things. Yeah. But I think there's a place.
What's the movie where they have that perfect drug that was just like made everything just like.
Oh yeah.
Limitless?
Yeah, limitless. Yeah.
Those are like
What was that?
Matt, do you think,
Right.
do you think just how divided our daily lives are with our phones and our attention going 5-10 different ways all at once, like that's certainly hindering getting into productive flow states in your day to day.
Yeah, I do. And I also think, and I noticed this in myself, I was like, so the phone is, I fucking hate the phone. I gotta figure something out about this phone.
Hey, we should do like
Yeah, I think like
This phone. So when you look at your phone, like if you get like, it's like, all right, I get a text message, and you hear the beep,
Yeah.
and you lift it up and you look at it, you get a 400% spike in dopamine. Well, guess what happens? You show your dopamine curve. So now, like the minute you go below it, and like if you are truly addicted to phone, you can like, it's like on the 45th second every time. Like, you know, like everybody has their own little rhythm. But like this is a dopaminergic addiction. And so in my thought, what I've realized is that neurosis is like actually keeping me out of the flow states.
Yeah.
And I'm super annoyed by it.
It kind of sounds like boundaries in all these areas are important, like sleep, our digital lives, our nutrition, like understanding the things that help us to recover from being stressed all day long are important to keep in place, rather than just like going through the day at that like highly stress level.
Yeah. That requires discipline,
Yeah.
which is difficult sometimes.
That was
I think it's powerful when
You're here every morning.
I think what Matt's getting at with some of like the information and medical stuff behind it is like the power of knowing what's going on maybe helps you to make informed decisions. So it's like, it's not that you never do the thing that you know is not going to be the best for you, but you know you consciously make that intentional choice of, hey, I'm going to go stay out later or look at my phone or whatever, but I know that this is the effect that it's having, and you can be more intentional, which takes a lot of discipline too.
Yes.
One of the issues is like medically, like if you have too much dopamine all the time, then you downregulate your dopamine receptors because your brain's always trying to,
Oh, it actually reduces the amount of receptors.
Yeah. So it's like if somebody's taking like too much dopamine drugs or whatnot, then the brain's response is downregulating dopamine receptors. So I think that might be one of the hard parts, like with phones and stuff. If you're constantly getting that, when you start to downregulate receptors, you're chasing it.
What are the dopamine drugs?
So there was that drug L-Dopa a long time ago. It was for people who had low dopamine receptors because of a disease anyway. What they found though was that when you give too much of it, then it's receptors too. So there's always this balance. And I do wonder because if you're chasing dopamine all the time, it's tough because then you're gonna find you have to do more to get that same effect.
Right. That's a tough withdrawal.
Do you think that there's like other ways that you could incorporate practices into your life to like reach those peak flow states and then when you get down, like not be chasing it so much? Like I'm thinking like journaling, gratitude, like daily affirmations, like things to kind of fill the gaps and almost keep you at that baseline when you're not on those extremes, like those ends of the spectrums. Like can you like speak towards that at all? Like is that something that you recommend? Or?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like, one that I got into is like the the cold bath. Oh yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
The sauna, because that is huge. I think 3 or 4 minutes in a cold bath is another 400% spike dopamine, but a natural one.
Yeah. And it doesn't leave you like chasing the
Yeah,
paralyzed
something about it
Yeah.
feels different.
Yeah.
You know? I couldn't say exactly why, but yeah. So then I like the sauna a lot. I like cardio. I probably replace with endorphins if I'm being honest. But and then also just rest. Like be okay with slowing down and resting. I think that's like something we don't do enough. It's just like this
Feels
next
wrong,
thing, next thing, and then we're stimulating, honestly, dopamine, and so then we feel depressed when we stop. But if you actually stop for long enough and you do some of the things that make you feel good, usually you kind of settle into that and you're like, oh, I'm here. And so there's probably like that.
Well, that's what you were saying at the beginning with like, if you are nurturing your ability to go between your beta ultra thinking brain all the time to a more alpha relaxed presence, like that's not full flow, but that is really healthy. And like I feel like that's kind of what like journaling or some meditation or these quieter activities like mixed in do.
And they're more obtainable, like day to day, like those are like the day to day things rather than like the what can I do every week or every month or annually, like the little things.
Those are the things that are more perhaps what drive us, like that's the bigger.
The reflection piece of like journaling and gratitude is, I have found helpful on that downside to go, oh my god, look what I did, or look where I was a year ago versus what I just accomplished, versus saying like I don't know what to do with myself. It's like looking at the experiences, wow, it's something that I'm proud of.
It's like the
doing.
opposite of focusing on what's missing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, and you can, and that is kind of a conscious choice in and of itself. Like, you can choose to think about what you're missing, or you can choose to think about like what you have and what's fulfilling right here, right now.
Yeah, and relationship too. We didn't talk a lot about that, but those like relationship. Look at all the chemicals you get from just being like having an authentic, connected relationship, right?
And
Whoever that is, like, could be a friend, could be a partner, could be a kid, a child. But like you can get them all there too, and so I think that's also an important thing to recognize. And we could be slowing down, we could be resting, we could be connecting.
It's good.
I see career doesn't produce any. Everybody walk out.
I got lazy. Thank you.
Resumes.
That's all I got.
That Razzle and I are doing it right.
Yeah.
We're gonna need a free gym.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Where the sneakers at?
Well, hopefully it was good. You guys got something out of it. I sincerely appreciate the time and the conversation. It was fun.
It's really
Yeah,
good.
thank you. Thank you very much, Matt. Super cool.
Thanks, Matt.
One last question, you said we're gonna get the slides, how are we gonna do that?
Great question.
Send them to me